I'm never sure if you're allowed to put bluesy notes into a Scottish tune, but then I'm never sure you're not supposed to. Welcome, everyone. My name's Adam Sutherland. You have tuned in to Errogie Live here on currently, at the moment of recording, it's Sunday the 23rd of March in the year of our Lord 2025. And yes, this is my little wee YouTube channel, which is mostly about writing your own tunes, and I'm trying to inspire, hopefully encourage people to start writing their own tunes. And yeah, I'm just going to share bits and bobs that I have found work for me, and hopefully some of it might work for you, and that's it. So welcome. That's a tune that I wrote in, I think, 2001, Last Train from Lanark. And yeah, it's in D minor, which if you've seen Spinal Tap, you'll be aware is the saddest of all keys. But it does have a certain feel. Do you think, if anyone's listening, who's doing, if anyone's gonna, wow, falling over myself, if anyone's gonna be adding comments, please do. It's all very, very much welcome. Do you have any thoughts on keys having any particular feel? I feel like D minor has its own feel, not just on the fiddle, but any instrument. It just seems to sit at a certain vibration, which gives it a wonderfully nostalgic, wistful feel. I've always loved it. So yeah, this tune is in D minor. I'm going to just walk you through like I suppose the kind of construction of it, but I'm also aware that music isn't just construction. It's not all just like left brain stuff. So hopefully it's not just going to be like so overly analytical that you lose the soul, because let's face it, music's also got to have, it's not just maths, it's also got to have some feeling. So I'm hoping that by analysing this tune and showing you how I wrote it, I'm not going to just like give the message that you should just like not be thinking about feelings, but same time feelings can be brought to life or aroused by certain shapes, sound shapes, which make you feel something. So it's all intertwined. Anyway, so this tune, I use this technique. I actually feel bad just using the words technique there, because it's just so, I find myself being drawn to using opposites in so many of my tunes I've written and the tunes that I will write. And I feel like I'm not a religious person, but I do feel a certain affinity with the kind of yin and yang thing, and I don't claim to know much about Taoism. I've read a little bit, but there's something to that, I think. The opposites being pleasing. So it's something I like to use a lot, and I'm going to show you how I did it in this tune, and then hopefully just encourage you to use, or at least consider using, the opposites. It's not something I always do. I never always do one thing, but it's like I have a kind of a tool shed of tools that I pick out, and one of them is, what's the opposite of this? What's the opposite of that? Alright, so the first thing that I'm actually going to take a step back from this tune for a second just to talk about opposites. I think the first time I noticed opposites being used to judicious effect was in some tunes that you hear a lot in Cape Breton Island and Nova Scotia. There's a whole bunch of tunes, but there's like a strathspey called King George IV, and then a reel called the King's Reel, and then another reel called the New King's Reel. And I remember just noticing, I mean, it's not like some kind of amazingly shrewd observation, that the first half of each of those tunes on the fiddle was on the G and the D string, and then the second half was on the A and the E strings. So in other words, the first half's down low, second half's up high. So I should give you an example. Like the King's Reel. The first half, part, and the second bit goes. So it's just like the first half is down there, second half's up there. It's just powerful. It contrasts. It's like, whoa, light and shade. So yeah, that's when I first noticed that. Oh, we comment, hey Linda, hey John. Linda, first tune you learned from me. You like D minor? Yeah, it's fun. So I'm going to talk about opposites. I'm also going to talk a little bit about how to make decisions for your own writing based on what you find to be satisfying. And there's this thing you can pay for. I call it posh YouTube. It's called Masterclass. I don't know if anyone here has Masterclass. I signed up for it in the pandemic because I wanted to learn from Hans Zimmer about how to write film music, and I keep forgetting to unsubscribe. Every year it comes out, so I'm forcing myself to just like digest everything in Masterclass. But there's this very funny Hans Zimmer quote. I'll try and do a wee impression of Hans. He speaks about like, I like writing in D, and it's nice that if you go, I'll try and play. He's sitting at a synthesizer. It's nice that if you go, it's satisfying. So it's like then a big bow, and I had to watch that again after first seeing it, and then I just kept watching it. I watched it an insane number of times because there was something. It was entertaining, but also there was just something about what he was saying that really hit me as something that I kind of knew, but it was just good to get a reminder of it, which was that he was making musical decisions about what he was gonna do and not do in a piece of music based on what was satisfying. It's satisfying, therefore it goes. So that's just a thought. I'm going to put this out there to you guys if you're watching at home. When you're making music, coming up with ideas, ultimately, yes, you have to come up with ideas and chuck them out, but at some point you have to kind of go with something, right? You have to decide on something, and often that decision-making process can be one that's like, you're not sure, what should I go for, what should I do? And what I'm wondering is maybe this is a wee reminder about what kind of things can help you make decisions, is what is satisfying. So if you're writing your tunes and you're like, I have a few different, say, options for a phrase, or go with the one that just feels satisfying. What is it that feels strongest? What is just satisfying? And I love that because it's bringing you back to the emotional side of things. It's not just a left brain thing. It's almost like what is satisfying ties together left and right brain. It's like, feels good, makes sense, but also feels great. Hey, Michael Bishop in the comments, you thought Hans was in the shed. And this is a hands-free zone. There we go. So that's just a little thought. What is satisfying? And I suppose I got started writing this tune. I was doing this thing, which I love to do. It's called taking a dog for a walk. I have a memory of being in primary school, and one day we were all given pencils and paper, and just told, put the pencil on the paper and just start drawing a line without thinking about what you're going to draw, and just see where the line goes. And it really just stayed with me. That just hit me, and it stayed with me because there's just something beautiful about starting to paint or draw before you even know what you're drawing. I think that I've heard that there's some Japanese art form which actually does this, and again, that was really validating in the same way as hearing Hans talking about what's satisfying. When I heard that there was some actual art form which is doing what I've kind of already been doing for ages, which is just taking a line and seeing where it goes, and the musical equivalent of that is just picking a note and just playing it and then changing note when you feel like it. It's something I'm going to maybe do on one of these live streams. The whole point of it is that you're not necessarily trying to write something, you're just seeing where the sound wants to go. And I find it really helpful as a way of bridging the gap between the sound you're making and what's kind of going on inside you at that time on that day. And when it goes well, I feel like I'm maybe just noodling, not really thinking, just playing one note to the next, not trying, just thinking about my life maybe, and then finding it. What happens is the more I think about what's going on in my life whilst also just making a sound, the more that what's going on in my life and in my emotions starts to link with the sound I'm making, until eventually the two are just totally connected, and the noises that you're making are just the sounds of what's going on in your head, or they're the sounds that make you feel better about what's going on in your head. And that's how I started writing this tune, and I found, having been doing that for a while, I found some satisfying notes which got me started. And here's what it is. It's all about D. I like writing in D. That's Hans Zimmer again. And I found it to be satisfying. I stumbled across this notion. I'm not the first person to do it, but I discovered it for myself on this day in 2001, which is that D on its own is satisfying, but in the same way as Hans made his big D satisfying by preceding it with a kind of setup for that D, I did it not the same way, but the same concept. I did this many years before I'd ever heard of him. I basically did some notes which, if you play them first, make the D that comes afterwards very satisfying. So I found it satisfying to go starting beneath the D. That's like G, A, C. And then skipping past D and going above it to F. F, E, D. So here's D on its own. Here's it starting beneath, going above it, and then landing on it. Sorry. I just find that really satisfying. I still do. So that's how I got started. Then I got this first phrase. I guess I'm going to be trying to hint at some chords here. I wanted to go from D minor down to B flat, or that's chord 1. Chord 6 in D minor. D is 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's B flat. So I want to go up to C and then back to D. So I guess I've been asked in the past, do I ever write tunes deliberately in a chord sequence? I found the chords and the tune came at the same time. I really wanted to suggest these chords whilst also having a tune. So I've got this kind of D minor chords to B flat major to C major to D minor, and with the tune so once I had that kind of journey from the D minor to the B flat to the C to the D with some notes, then it was just a case of like, I remember feeling the excitement. Oh, I'm excited. It's just a case of, do I need to do much more, or is that half a tune? When you've got a phrase a second phrase, a third phrase, and a fourth phrase. Often that's all you need for a part. So yeah, the storytelling aspect of this tune is, it's not so much question answer. It's like it's almost like a four phrase, or one long phrase that just goes on a very meandering journey. Yeah, I think it's almost like one phrase. That's just the first part done. I'm going to plonk that on the screen actually, just so you can see it. Let's see, this is going to work. No, it's not going to work. What if I do that? How about this? So you can see the dots on the screen now. It's the same thing twice. There's a slight variation. If you look at the third line down, the fourth bar of that third line, I just changed the tune a little bit. I guess I felt that it wasn't quite interesting enough to have it being repeated exactly the same way twice in a row. Couple of nice comments coming in there. Thank you so much. Thank you all. Yeah, nice enclosure. Oh, thank you, Michael. I'm glad you like this tune so much. And Linda, best start to a tune. We recorded it with Adelaide Fiddle Club's first CD. Of course you did, not just Melbourne. And Andrina says she loves this tune too. Thank you. Yes, Ali, it's in 3/4 time. 3 is an amazing number in music. I just find it deeply fascinating. It's not 2, it's not 4, which is obvious to say, but in terms of feel, it's just a totally different universe. Yeah, going back to the tune, if you look at the third line round, I just kind of changed it a wee bit. So the third line, fourth bar of the third line, which is bar 13, that's like a variation of what the fourth bar of the tune does. So the fourth bar is the end of line 1. You've got, that's the fourth bar of line 1. And then the corresponding phrase, when you repeat the whole lot, is bar 13, or the fourth bar of line 3. It just serves to make it a little bit more interesting. It's the balance, I think, writing tunes is about having enough repetition that it feels like a tune, but not having too much repetition that it's kind of a little bit not exciting enough, but not having too little repetition that it's not even a tune anymore. I think, man, I'm learning so much from just explaining things out loud. I'm realizing things I hadn't actually realized. Yeah, writing a tune is so much about just writing a tune is so much about getting it so it is a tune. It's got, tunes have got, I think tunes are defined by having a certain amount of repetition. It's not just through composed from the start, continuous flow. It does have something. Tunes have got a structure of some kind to them with enough repetition. But if you have too much repetition, it's like you lose interest and maybe don't want to play it anymore. Not enough repetition and it's just too much, you tend to get overwhelmed and you don't care. In this case, in this tune, I felt it wasn't quite interesting enough to have it exactly the same way both times. So I'm going to play the first half of the tune one more time. I just want you to look at the bar 4 and then look at the corresponding bar 2 lines later and just tell me what you think. also play that phrase in bar 13 sometimes with a wee A flat instead of A natural. A natural is, but sometimes I feel like it's a little bit too polite sounding, so I quite like, I think a total A flat is a little bit too, I like a little bit somewhere between G and A flat, at G and A. So that's the first part. You've got the setup towards the D, ba-da-dum-da-da, bow, and then just taking this little tune on a wee journey through some different chords. I would like to say that I suppose just describing the tune, you don't have much jumping around in terms of big leaps. It's all the notes are very close to each other. So it's all very close. I don't think I necessarily decided to do that, but that's just what this tune does. That's the first half. So I guess I had that, and because I've just always loved tunes that do go maybe from low in the first half to high in the second half, I think I just thought, right, here we go. Just going to go high and see what happens. A couple more comments there. Linda doesn't feel like 3, which is great. Yeah, I suppose it. Yeah, you love how it starts in the G and finally gets to dusty parts on E. Yeah, dusty, definitely. So let's look at the second part here. So I just thought, I remember just thinking, right, I'm going to just go up and play the note to D minor. Yeah, so that's D. I can remember, right? I can remember writing all of the tunes that I still feel are good enough to keep playing. I still find interesting. I can remember writing them, and I can remember exactly how I wrote them and when I did it. I can't remember what I'm supposed to buy from the shops. My brain is extremely selective, so certain things I will remember and never forget, and other things I just forget frustratingly quickly. But I can remember writing this, and I remember thinking, so I'm just going from bar 18 here, it's the start of the second part, rising up from bar 17, and I thought, okay, what's the opposite of this? What is the opposite of? To me, it's both of those phrases go towards an F. The first one comes at the F from below. The other one arrives at F but from above. And I'm thinking, I'll try that, and thinking, that's satisfying, like that, but then it needs to go somewhere else, I think, chordally. So what's somewhere kind of neither of those places but still in the same part of the fiddle? G. And then now hitting that G, because G's not in the chords of D minor, like the first bar 18, D and F and D, and then you got to A to F, and yeah, there's other chords you can put beneath that, but G is not there. So G is taking you somewhere a little bit new. So the kind of chords. Starting to sound a bit like the House of the Rising Sun when you play it like that. That's where I felt. And then I thought, okay, maybe that's enough of a. Maybe those 4 bars, that's enough to write the second half. this point, what I tend to do is if I've got a reasonably pleasing 4-bar phrase, I just, rather than trying to immediately invent something else, I just go, right, can I just have those 4 bars again without changing them? Is that enough? And sometimes it is, in which case, job done. You haven't gone down some new rabbit hole of looking for new melodies. You're just kind of compounding and consolidating what you've already got. So that's I give it the same advice all the time, but if you've got 4 bars of music, if you've got a question phrase or an answer phrase or something you like, just ask yourself, can I just do that again? And is that enough? And maybe you do it again, it's a little bit boring because it's exactly the same thing, so then you just change it a tiny bit. And what I want to do is change it by the smallest amount possible, so it's basically the same thing again but slightly different, and then ask myself again, is that enough of a change? And sometimes it is. Sometimes it's like okay to have the same 4 bars twice, but the second time it's just slightly different. Sometimes that's enough. Other times you have to change it more, but so often I find you can have your 4 bars that you've got just repeated with the smallest change. And I just encourage you to maybe try and make the smallest changes possible. So that's what I did here. I'm going to start from bar 18, and you'll see it's basically the same 4-bar phrase twice, but I just changed it a little bit. So it's just got a slightly different ending. Instead of going start, it's the same. The C sharp was originally just a variation that I chucked in, and then it became the tune. It used to be C naturals. So I'll play from bar 18. But it ended up becoming. I just loved playing that variation C sharp so much that I just observed that, well, that's ostensibly and basically that is actually the tune. We're in D minor. You don't have C sharps in this particular version of D minor. There is a D minor scale you can learn that has C sharps, but it's not part of this tune, so that's a bit of a different color. So then it's just the same thing again. Can I get away with playing those 4 bars again? And then there's this thing which you can see the very, very bottom line starts with an insanely high note. It's a D. This is something that I've noticed. Again, I try to learn from pre-existing tunes, and this is something that is just in quite a lot of tunes. What it is it's a note that doesn't feature anywhere else in the tune so far, and it doesn't feature anywhere else in the tune afterwards. In other words, this note is just there once, and it's also the highest note in the tune. And where it happens is it's at the final phrase of the second part, the final phrase of the whole tune. It's the ultimate conclusion phrase, which is a phrase I use all the time. So just to recap, you could try this if you're thinking about how to finish your tune. Maybe the last 4 bars could start with a note that you haven't used before and is higher up than all the other notes before cascading down. I'd be very surprised if you did that and it sounded like this tune or like any other tune that does that. This is the beautiful thing about some of these techniques of composing. You're not likely to actually sound like an hour piece if you take a concept and do it your way. The concept here being have a new note that only happens once, have it at the start of the last 4 bars of the tune, it's a thing that happens once and make it higher up in pitch. Or, what else could you do? What's the opposite of higher up in pitch? Maybe it's the lowest note. Maybe it's a note lower than any other note. Maybe it's something different. It's a note that's different some other way, but something different happens at this point. So I'm just expanding this way of thinking here. I've been trying to work out how to teach this. This is a way of thinking that I've learned. I feel like someone else could articulate this better than me, but I'm going to try. When you've stumbled across something which seems to work, let's say, okay, a new note at the start of the end of the tune, I have this thing where I hit a button in my head and go, what? Okay, this is the highest note, it's a new note, it's high, but what other things could I do at this point in the tune? So it's almost like internet searching on Google, but like changing your search terms search for every possible thing I could do at this point in the tune, not just exclusively changing the pitch. So you might go, okay, let's bring in rhythm, let's bring in lower pitch, let's bring in something new. How many different things can I think of that could be satisfying? That, expand your search. So I'm telling you, just try a high note, but you could use this style of thinking to go, yeah, but what else could I do? Maybe I could scratch my brain and just, how many different things could there be that are just different? So pitch, rhythm, combinations thereof, silence, I don't know, but just think of all the different ways you could be different somehow at that point. That's like taking it. It's like zooming out from your map, where you're zoomed in. You've got, okay, just the highest note. Zooming out is going, what are all the ways that something different could just happen there, not exclusively just the highest note. So that's the kind of taking that. Yeah, it's like stepping back from the map. I've stumbled across loads of other creative ideas that way, by not just being too caught up in one little technique, but going, how many different things could there be, or what is this? What's the wider lesson here? Hope that makes sense. I'm going to look at some comments here. Not sure if this was mentioned earlier, but personally, hey Mike, always used to have trouble hearing where the one is in this tune. Took me ages to get it right. I really like that rhythmic ambiguity though. I personally hate tunes that I can't find the one in. Does my head in. And I always think, that's maybe a bit of a problem. But it's not a problem for you, because you say you love the tune. So I do agree. I think the introduction, that's an anacrusis start. The anacrusis, which sounds like a disease, that's just the notes that come before beat 1. They're actually the last notes of the tune. Tunes are like circles, right? If you think of it as a clock face, so 12 is the start of the tune, and those notes start kicking off just after 11, quite close to 11 o'clock. They start kicking off like 11:15, whereas most upbeat notes or anacrusis notes tend to start just before 12. So those notes, ba 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 ba, there's so many of them. That's unusual. So that might be what's tripping you up there, and that makes sense. Ali, skipping Antiques Roadshow for this. Thankfully, no regrets. Oh, Ali, can I use that on my social media? Can I take a screenshot of that? I want to do that with your permission, because I feel like someone's skipping the Antiques Roadshow to get insanely nerdy about tune writing is, well, that's the good stuff right there. I'm delighted. Tonight I will go to bed and go, somebody voluntarily missed the Antiques Roadshow to tune in to me ranting and raving in my shed. I'm so happy about that. The Antique... Oh, it's a good TV show as well, let's face it. Okay, so back to the tune. This thing happens once, it's the highest note in the tune. What that does, I think, not just in this tune, but other tunes that have this high note that's higher than all the other notes, and they appear at this point in the tune, what it does is it kind of means that when you start the tune from the beginning and you know that you're going towards that high note. It means that the rest of the whole tune up until that point is all about getting to that note. So it's a way of almost like reverse engineering the purpose of the story. I'm using the word story because we are basically writing stories here. You're making up stories. Stories have a timeline. They have a start, they have a beginning, they have an end. They take you on a pleasing, satisfying journey. And having this high peak at the end, it draws into sharp focus almost the purpose of everything that comes before it, particularly the second part. So I'm going to play you the second part and just land on that top note. Just check my tuning because it's hot in here. So I'm going to go from the start of the second part. So that's going into bar 18. So then once you're up there, it's just about, I've climbed up a tree, how do I get down? And that first note of the very last bar, that D, that's actually the end of the tune, because then you're into the last 5 notes of the tune are the anacrusis upbeat notes that we spoke about right back at the beginning. So I'm going to go from the last line. And then hopefully in this case, the thing that was achieved so well in King George IV, Strathspeys, and all the tunes that are high and low in the contrasting parts is that once you have a second part which is higher up in the first part, or take a step back, a second part that's just in a contrasting bit to the first part, that when you get to the end of that second part, you then go back to the first part and your brain's like, oh yeah, I like it down here. So let me know if anyone who's tried writing tunes before, have anyone ever tried this? Deliberately going, right, bring about a tune that's low in the first part, high in the second part. I'm going to just ask you guys to maybe try that if you feel like it, you have time. Ali says, last train home vibe. Hey Dream Angus, nice to see you. Interesting point about conclusion idea phrase, having an ascending to a high note destination, then descending. Helpful ideas, thank you. Cool, thank you. There's just something about a note that's higher up than everything else, and having it at that bit, it's just something that I've just learned from loads of great tunes. Trying to think of a few, I can't think of one off the top of my head, but it's just an amazing thing. So maybe you could try that. As always, if you're trying to write a tune with a certain thing, you might find out that the thing that you were doing, whether it's using arpeggios or having contrasting parts, you might find that the tune starts to wade in and say, yeah, I'm not actually, that's not who I am. So whenever you're trying something that is, it's almost like don't grip too tightly. If you feel the tune suddenly wanting to lurch off in a new direction, like let the tune go that way. Like don't hold on too tight. But equally, if the tune isn't wanting to go somewhere, you can just shove it somewhere. So this is the kind of contrasting thing. You've got just low, then high, and then even higher, and then cascading back down. And also just opposites happening in the second part. What's the opposite of? So that is Last Train from Lanark. It's in waltz time, 3/4 time. It's maybe not the most waltzy tune, but it's in threes. I hope some of this has been helpful. Contrasting phrases is or opposite, the opposite, finding the opposite of any kind of phrase is something I'd like. That's kind of like my main thing I want to try and chuck out at you, is what is the opposite. And sometimes the opposite isn't necessarily like just the phrase you've played upside down. Like if you have a tune that's all, the first half is all one thing, then what's the opposite? One thing might not necessarily be immediately obvious what that one thing is, but I would ask yourself, when you've written a wee first half of tune, say, what is this first half doing? What are its defining features? And then find the opposite. So I'll play a bit of a jig I wrote. This is called the Sea of Okhotsk, and I wrote the second part after finding, I found this opening phrase. This is a jig now in G minor. I got hooked on this little ditty. That's not the whole tune, that's just my opening phrase. So I wrote this first half. And the second part, I did the opposite of the first part, but to find out what the opposite of the first part was, I had to go, well, what is the first part? And the first part in this case is just very small bunch of notes, all very close to each other, kind of sneaky. Yes, you jump up there for a wee second, but most of it's. So I thought, what is the opposite of a first part that's got very small intervals? Well, it's going to, first of all, we're going to get away from G. So I went to C, which is just like going back to chords again. If you're in chord, if you go to chord 4 or chord 5 after your first part's been around chord 1, that's also taking you somewhere fresh. Just a reminder, if you're in G minor, whatever key you're in, that's 1. Chord 4 is just the 4th note up in the scale from G. And you just make your notes around that. So I made it around chord 4, and I thought, what about doing some big leaps? The opposite of. So it's just, that was one example of me doing the opposites, but in order for me to do the opposite to the first half, I had to really understand what is the first half's doing, and that's quite hard sometimes because it's almost like abstract. Like if I said to you, what's the opposite of, you might have gone, just change direction, but it's still doing small notes. The opposite is the opposite of what it is conceptually, and what is it? It's lots of this. So it's not easy to, not always easy this, but when you've written a tune, maybe if you've got any tunes you're working on, ask yourself, what is this? And then what's the opposite of that? Does that make sense? I'll look at some of the comments here. Linda, your latest tune was inspired by your arpeggio chat. Yay! Off to dinner. Have a nice dinner. I am so happy. That's exactly the kind of chat I would love. Just that something that was said in one of these things sparks something, which then sets off a chain reaction in someone else's brain. Linda, so happy about that. Hey Michael, difficulty for you in making the contrast flowing rather than too deliberate. Okay, so you want it to sound contrasting but not too deliberately contrasting. I guess I'd have to like hear the exact tune. Maybe you've put one in the Discord. I have a Discord server for tune writers. Also, I'd have to just say something just now. Most of the people watching this, according to my data from YouTube, most of you are unsubscribed. So I'm not like wagging fingers at you, but I've just would say, if you're watching this and you want to subscribe, that would massively help me, because yeah, it's just I'm trying to like get this YouTube channel to a certain point where I can hopefully like make it easier to pay the bills and stuff like that. And any of you guys subscribing to this, if you haven't, it's just edging me a little bit closer, so much appreciated. Yes, so Michael, you're talking about making it contrast flowing rather than too deliberate. So I guess if I was thinking that sounds too deliberate to me and not flowing enough, I would then go, how can I make it more flowing? And I would just focus on that one thing. Maybe you can change some notes. If things aren't flowing, sometimes it's because you've maybe got some big intervals, blah, 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 like whoa, big leaps, then lots of big leaps. So I might start going, how can I do the same thing but maybe with smaller leaps? But the fact that you're thinking about whether your tune is flowing or not is great, I think, because that's what tunes are supposed to do. It's so much of it is like energy or water. There's nothing obstructing it. Everything does just flow effortlessly. And you want to just look for a tune that just each phrase flows into the next, etc. Okay, I'm going to play this tune, and I'm going to maybe just wander around with it. I might just take it on a bit of a journey, I don't know. And then I'll probably go in and have some food. Thank you all for coming and saying hello. A lot of you are here like every week. That's amazing. And if you're in the future, hello. And yes, please like and subscribe. Also put in comments in the chat after the video has gone live. I don't expect you to do that, but that also helps the YouTube algorithm send it out to more people who haven't seen it yet. There we go. Enough of that. Okay, I'm going to put the tune back on the screen. And I find this tune quite hard to play in tune, which is embarrassing if you've written a tune and you can't really play it, but I'm going to give it a whirl again and I'm going to just see what happens. So here we go. Let's see now. Alright, Last Train from Lanark. Choo choo. Thank you all for coming and saying hello. It's been enlightening for me as well to hear from you, and I hope this has helped in some way. Maybe even if it's just one little thing that comes out of any of these things, but that thing helps, then that's a win. I don't ever expect anyone to remember all the stuff. I certainly, when I go to classes or watch YouTube videos, I don't expect myself to learn everything. I just look for the one thing maybe that resonates the most, and maybe that's some advice I'd give you for your learning just in general. Is it's better to get one thing and have that thing be something that really actually makes a difference than try and get everything. I end up getting nothing. So maybe just look for one thing and then chew on it for as long as you need, and hopefully it becomes part of your tool shed, your tool shed of your musical mind. So some nice comments coming in there. Thank you so much for all the kind comments. It's really amazing. So thank you all very, very much, and I will say cheerio for now. So thank you all very, very much indeed. Okay, bye bye.